and you can go ahead and get started.
All right. So my project it focuses on politics and social media. So as time changes, the voting behavior of people changes with time. The Carter administration saw that with the Watergate scandal that Nixon had, and then after that, the Reagan administration went off with the Iran hostage situation. As time changes, so does new political upheavals. In 2008, a Barack Obama campaign, he used social media to his advantage. He sold himself as an average man, and with his message on social media, it helped spread what his views were. Now, this continues into modern time as well. With a computer in everybody's pockets, it is so easy to go on social media for hours on end. With it, it is inevitable for people to watch political or news stories due to this. We have seen how much the influence social media has on people. For example, on January 6, 2021, when people stormed the Capitol building, we saw people on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, even Twitch stream what happened. Or more recently, with the Russo-Ukrainian War in 2022, we saw millions on social media share stories, donation links, and facts on what's going on in the war, and how they can personally help what's going on. This could be seen even last year in October on October 7th, with the Israeli-Palestine conflict flared up, we saw people call for reforms, protest, and boycott bans who are supporting either sides. With this, the impact of social media cannot be denied. So, with how I got to my topic, when I did AP seminar, I realized that social media has an immense influence on politics. But because of my topic at that time, my focus was not directly related to social media and politics. So I realized that I could not pursue this effect. So I knew that because of my interest in this field, I would want to do it in AP research. So the way that I researched my topic was that in my late review, I looked at social media and politics and how they collude with each other. I realized that social media they have two aspects that are really impactful on politics. The first is that in social media, there's algorithms to show what people see, and with it, if people interact with more certain types of feed, they'll get promoted more with it. So I realized that if people interact with like a political message, they'll get more messages related to that. This can lead to a effect called echo chamber. With the echo chamber, I realized that people will get the same feed. So if they scroll on social media on hours on end, they should be getting the same feed, which influences how they perceive news stories. Another issue that I realized is that people use multiple forms of social media, and because of this, they don't realize that they can spend more time on it, which means that they don't realize that the influence is not to a really strong degree. So I decided to go with a non-traditional approach on social media. I decided to look at how much influence does it have on somebody if they spend more hours on it. So my question is, does the increase of social media cause one to participate in politics more? The definition of more participation I decided for my project would be in two categories. The first is physical. With physical participation, I determined that anything that is done to actively call for reforms or vote is physical. The other is verbal. Verbal can be anything done that is to spread a message or that is done so that they can promote something. So, with it, my hypothesis is that with more social media time, people would be more influenced by what they see online uh, the because of the echo chamber effect. So, for my sampling method and my research method, I decided to go with the survey. The survey I chose was the in-person survey that I would directly ask the person. With this, I had add some limitations that I went around. So for the survey, because it's in person, I had to choose locations for it. The two locations I decided to do first were the Tampa Premium Outlets and the Wiregrass Malls. Along with these two locations, I picked the Western Plaza, International Plaza, and Citrus Park. The four questions I asked at these locations were simple. What generation are you in? Do you how long do you spend on social media for political and news purposes? And has this impacted how you perceive news throughout how you perceive news through news through like time? So with our first target group, I decided to
That's never happened in my in-person one.
yeah, I
I'll
just hit the
hear
wrong
you.
button.
No one got snatched up into the sky.
Oh, what?
He's
Yeah,
back.
sorry, I hit the wrong button. Well,
All right.
do I just want me to rerun it?
You
All right, sorry. All right, so for I started with Gen Z as my first target group. Um, I didn't have a set amount of people that I wanted to interview at first. I just knew that I had an end goal. For with my end goal, I wanted to have 10 people who saw political messages and had it change. So with Gen Z, I found that 35 people out of 53 use social media for non news purposes, and I found that people use social media for news purposes, but three of them didn't have any effect, and 10 did have change. So with this, I found it interesting because majority of Gen Z don't use. Majority of the Gen Z who said they used it for political changes saw a change. Then with that, majority of them said that the impact they felt was if they saw stories that they had a personal connection with, such as somebody who I interviewed said that they're voting this year. They found it interesting how like different parties are doing approaches to voter rights. So they shared it with more people that they knew are of voting age. And so for the next age group that I looked at, it was millennials. With millennials, I found that 12 people out of the people interviewed had no political change after looking at what they saw. So with this, the most significant piece of evidence that I got out was that they had the most physical change. Majority of Gen Z, they were more verbal change that they spread stories to other people. But with millennials, they saw that they saw like what was going on and they protested or they voted for what they thought was right. So with it, the millennials with the most screen time on average in a week was about 30 hours. They were the ones who were more likely to be more physical. But I but because of what I saw with Gen Z, I think that this might just be an outlier. So Gen X, majority of them didn't use social media for news purposes. I attribute this to the fact that more older generations use traditional forms of media to get their news. So with it, I found that only 48 people of Gen X used it for just general purposes, such as like keeping up with family. But with 22 people using it for political purposes and 12 out of the 22 not using it like not having any influence. So with the people that had influence, I saw that they spread messages on their local communities, such as like local issues, such as like if there's like a local election or if a mayor is up for running. But none of them really said anything that they would do physically. Majority of them said that they'll just share stories with people if they think it's important. And so for my last age group that I looked at were boomers. Majority of them didn't really use social media. I attribute this to the fact that it's a newer technology, and as technology forms, older generations won't be as likely to hop on right away. So with the people that did use social media for boomers, I found that 28 of them did not use it for any political use, and then 17 of them used it for political use, but they didn't see a change after watching the news. So along with Gen X, boomers, like they didn't really have a physical change. Most of their change was a vocal. They spread their messages to their communities about what's going on, and they just shared stories with friends and families about what's going on. Um, when I interviewed some, they said that the only reason why they shared stories to other people is if they are personally impacted by a news story, or if they know people who are impacted by a news story. So overall, nearly 50% of all participants use social media, with 132 of them using it, but not a lot of them used it for 132 of them used it, but it wasn't for political use. So 74 people, or roughly 25%, did not use social media at all. So that piece of information I didn't really find impactful, because it was already known that not all 100% of people use social media. What did I find interesting was the percentages. I found that 40 people did have an impact, like social media did have an impact, and 37 did not. So I think that with more, as time passes on, social media will have a bigger impact. And this is just the data, just with those change and no change. So the limitations of my project was that I did it in person. So my local survey base was just people around. So with this, I feel like data could be different if it's done online, because it can be with different people from different states. So that could give me different data. And then with definition. So many people have different definitions of social media. Some, when I ask people their definition of social media, a lot of them said TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, but some people said YouTube and Twitch. So because of this lack of generalized definition of social media, I didn't tell people what I was including in my sample. And so because of this, like the first few people didn't include some sources that the latter would. And with age. So the issue with age is that the older generations don't use social media as much as the younger generations. This is evident by the amount of people that interviewed, with boomers and Gen X being almost double the amount of Gen Z and millennials. So I feel like with age, the older somebody gets, the chances of them using social media decreases. Another issue is motivation. With motivation, I saw that most people use had verbal influence just because it's easy. Because people had the option to share stories by just clicking the share button with others, it is easy for them to say I was verbally influenced. But with physical influence, I found that because it takes more time and it's harder to actually do, not as much people had physical influence. So for my future goals, if I were to conduct this survey again, I would switch it to online, so that more people could be reached and not a local base. And then I'll do a broader survey base by sending it to people from different states or different counties in Florida, so that I can get a rough idea of what people think. So coming to my conclusion, I concluded that my hypothesis was wrong, that with more time on social media, it doesn't really have an impact on how people perceive what they saw. I feel like that with what they see is a bigger defining factor of their influence. And so because of a majority of people sharing articles just because it's important to them, I figured that the relative influence based on importance is higher than the amount of screen time people spend on social media. And then these are my sources for my lit review, and then these are the sources for the slides. And I am done with that.
Do you want us to ask the first question?
Yeah, I'll go last.
Okay.
So if you would like to, whichever question from whichever group you would like to pose, go right ahead. Thank you.
Okay. So from group one, Michael, how did your initial exploration of the scholarly conversation lead to your final research question?
So, as I said during my lit review, I realized that a lot of the research was either like independent, platforms, such as one was focused on Twitter, it looked at the influence of the 2016, 2018, and 2020 elections and how Twitter moderated their platform. I found out that like they had a personal, like the platform had a bias towards a political party. Another thing that I realized during my lit review was the fact that like there was no like direct correlation found. So I was hoping to bridge the gap between the correlations between like amount of time somebody spends on social media for political purposes and the degree of influence they got from it.
And I'll go next. The question I've chosen is from the reflection throughout the inquiry process. What was the most important research skill you developed as a result of this process, and how might you apply it to your future endeavors?
So one of the most important skills that I developed from this was during my survey. I realized that it is easier to have a set goal in mind because instead of wandering around like trying to get like people to interview, I knew that I wanted to have a set goal of how many people that I wanted to target. So my baseline was 10 people who were influenced. So because of it, I knew that like I didn't want to have a set number of people that I wanted to interview right away because after the first couple of interviews, I realized that not a lot of people would be influenced, which I was wrong apparently. So by like looking at like the end goal, I realized that it would be so much easier if I just kept on interviewing people, and then with the interviews, I would just like put them into their own categories. As soon as my 10-person goal was achieved, I'll cross off that age group. So it would just like makes everything so much more efficient. It saves you so much time. It just makes interviewing a lot easier.
All right. So I'm going to actually ask you a couple of questions. But for my first one, from group 2 about your depth of understanding, what would you say are the real world implications or the consequences of the findings from your project?
So with the real world implications, I figured that with like a better understanding of social media and politics, people can use social media more to show like to like advertise. Like let's just say in the 2024 elections, the political parties they can spend more money on social media to get their message across than rather like traditional methods of campaigning.
Question is along the same lines, but this one is instead of real world implications, what would you say are the directions for future researchers or the implications on the academic side of things?
So for future academic purposes, I feel like with better like a better understanding, like with the definitions, like for physical, like if a researcher just like focus on physical participation in politics, they can directly find whether if like more screen time and more like critical news articles come out, like it can lead to like more or less physical influence on people via social media.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.